everybody. I am so glad that you are here for today's episode of the Attachment Theory in Action podcast. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Today, I have the absolute privilege of welcoming Stephen Hanmer de Elia. Stephen is a licensed clinical social worker with a law degree in international human rights. For more than 25 years, Stephen has supported children, youth, and families worldwide as a therapist, social worker, and leader in shaping policies and programs. His work has taken him from refugee camps and conflict zones to child welfare agencies and global institutions. I cannot wait for our conversation today. Well, hi, Stephen. Thank you so much for joining me on our Attachment Theory in Action podcast.
Thank you, Christy. It's great to be here.
So, my regular listeners know that I always start the podcast with the same question. And the question is, was there anything in your early life, early career that really led you into the work that you're doing today? Tell us a bit about your story.
Yeah, no, thank you. And from early on for me, connection was my oxygen. And I didn't have the words for it then, but my body knew. My body knew when it was abundant, and knew when it thinned, when I was seen and when I was not. I was born in Colombia to a Uruguayan mother, an English father. My brother, who's 2 years older, was born in Ecuador, and we moved constantly. Colombia, Ecuador, Spain, Uruguay. We lived twice in each country with the exception of Colombia. And as I was reflecting or thinking about it, each place sort of became like an attachment figure. I connect deeply with the people, the rhythms, the spaces, even the Spanish accents. And then we'd move on. And when we came back, it really never quite felt the same. So I learned how to bond quickly. I also learned how to let go. And in my childhood, like the biggest rupture came when I was 13 and my father killed himself. And as you can imagine, the act itself, it was devastating, but so was the aftermath. We had to leave Spain, moved back to a Uruguay that felt unfamiliar. Then my brother felt ill, my mother remarried and was widowed again. And so layer upon layer, the ground, it just kept shifting. And looking back, I can see how all of that, it shaped my nervous system, my sense of safety, my relationship to stability, and my deep need for grounded connection. And it's why I do the work I do now, creating spaces where connection can feel safe enough to risk again. And it's looked differently across the over 25 years I've been doing this work. It's ranged from working in humanitarian contexts in Africa and the Middle East, Southeast Asia, with organizations like UNICEF, to leading child welfare initiatives here in New York City, and providing therapy for children, teenagers, adults, and families.
Thank you, Stephen, for just sharing some of your story with us and some of that personal history that you have. Wow, what a journey you've been on, both individually and with your family. You know, it, you said connection was your oxygen. I mean, to me, that's just such a powerful saying, or not even a saying, but the way that you phrase it is so powerful to me. And you said that you could tell when it was there and when it wasn't. What were some of the things that maybe either felt different or looked different when you knew it was there versus not there?
Yeah, it's interesting, and this is language that I've acquired later in life, and this is the beautiful thing about ourselves, right? Our attachment stories are always constantly, in some ways, being rewritten or being understanding them in different ways. And what for me, my experience was it was so. As I look back, it was so much within my own body, right? And even like just give you an example around Spanish, right? So in every Spanish speaking country, the accents are different. And so my Spanish would change. When we moved from Ecuador to Spain, I was called a South American in Spain. When we moved from Spain to Uruguay, I was called a Spaniard. And we say gallego in Uruguay, people from Spain. And so it was, my voice itself, it held traces of the past and the present. Um, and it was always a reminder that I was never fully inside, never fully outside.
Mm.
I was in sort of this in-between place. And also even the story of my name. I'm Stephen English father, so I have an English name, but I lived in Spanish-speaking countries. So it's always that story about Esteban, Stephen, all the different ways that just the name is connected so much to the past that becomes present, sometimes more visible, more explicit than in other spaces. And so it's something that's, been really experiencing that. And as I've been more engaged over the last few years, exploring what it means for within our bodies and attachment. And so that's why I think of it like oxygen, that you can take for granted in so many ways. And then you become so aware when it's very full and when it's not full.
Mhm. Something that you just said, we were chatting before we got on here, and you kind of struck a thought in me. You mentioned about kind of being in this in between.
Yeah.
And I think about our kiddos who are experiencing some of those attachment disruptions. Um, Maybe they have an insecure or adaptive attachment style, or maybe they're just experiencing some disruptions. But I think about how many of them, if they were really to dig deep, feel that they're in this in between, I'm not fully accepted, but I want to be accepted, and not fully connecting, but want to connect. And so I'm stuck in this in between.
Yeah, I think Christy, that's something, so when I work with in all different types of contexts, but I also work with parents who are not together and children who go from home to home. And that in between space is lived in within their own bodies. And so, it's really like that space when I'm with one parent, I'm this way. When I'm with this other parent, I'm this way. Because what I have seen and what's hard, and this is the why I work so closely with parents, is that we sometimes forget or we don't realize that children will give up everything, anything about themselves to have a connection to their parent. And if that means that I have to be a different human being with parent A, and then when I'm with parent B, I'm a different human being. I will do that. And I will give up my own sense of who I am. And that's the work. And so many times what I work when I work with parents is you want that same child to show in one parent's home and in another parent's home, that they're secure in terms of who they are and they're seen as that. And yes, there are different rhythms, different ways of being in a relationship with one parent. What can I get away with this parent that I don't get away with this parent? Food, all of this, but it's really essential for me that continuity of who I am and identity. That is sort of that through line that is critical, and that tells me when I work with children and families, if that child's the same with me, I have the same sense of who they are, the parent with the other parent, because I do dyadic work for individual with separate parents. That's a good sign. That's a sign that there's a strong sense of my identity. I'm allowed to be myself, and yes, I will wear a different hat when I'm in my home with mom and my home and dad, but I'm still, in essence, the same person.
Yeah, I'm just, to me, that's just so deep. I don't, I think what makes it so deep is as you've identified your niche, like you work with those adults oftentimes separately, but in that parallel process. And that doesn't often happen in a therapy space. And so that's why I think it's so powerful to then be able to really dive deep into, as you put it, who that child is in each of those relationships, and helping that child to understand you're laying the foundation really of that work on the self that so many adults do, to helping that child understand their true self and that they can be their true self with both parents, that the parents' behavior or opinions is not the reflection of the true self of the child.
Right, right. And for the parent to see their child as their child is, right? And so that's again like that's a lot of my work is dyadic work. So the parent will be in the therapeutic space with the child. The three of us will be together. And it's that space where the parent is able to see their child, where the child can fully share themselves and fully share themselves with all of that's inside, and the parent's there to receive that, to accept that. And so that is really critical work.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into the work that you do, because you are very much influenced and do the work of
Mhm.
DDP, right?
Yeah.
For a lot of our listeners will know DDP. Some
Mhm.
may not. From your perspective, give us a little bit of a what is DDP to you? How do you work with it? And then talk a little bit about the three strands.
Yeah, yeah. And if it's okay that, when I think about my work as a therapist, there's sort of three main lenses I use in my work. One is DDP, so dyadic developmental psychotherapy. The other one is polyvagal theory, and the third one is somatic experiencing. So if it's okay, I'll go through each of them and I'll stop after
Absolutely.
DDP and then we can talk about that. But DDP, for me, the heart of DDP is this reminder that we grow in the context of relationships, that healing attachment trauma requires relationships. It's
Mhm.
not just about insight. You can't logic your way into trust. It's built through repeated lived experience of safety, acceptance, and connection. And that is critical. And that's the main thing when I think about DDP. And there's sort of two overriding principles about DDP that really message that to me and the work I do with families. One is intersubjectivity, and the other one is pace. What do I mean, and what does DDP mean by intersubjectivity? It's a heart of human development. From the moment we're born, we're communicating with each other through reciprocal, nonverbal, tuned in ways, the infant with the parent with the infant. And the key element of this is that it's a two-way direction, right? A two-way way of communicating. Intersubjectivity, again, going back to that space in between, that's where connection happens. That's where growth happens. And it can't be the parent communicating just to the child, the parent directing the child. It's also about the child communicating with a parent, the child influencing them parent. And it's this beautiful thing to see in the therapeutic space when that happens, when you see that happening, when there's a space where both parent and child grow together, where the parent is able to see their child as their own unique being, not a reproduction or projection of them or their unfulfilled wishes of hopes, but their own unique being, and where that child is also influencing the parent. And in the therapeutic space, the way that we practice intersubjectivity is through pace. And this is the second element of DDP. And what is pace? Pace is about playfulness. So, when we play, we lower our defenses, invites openness. It's about acceptance. Acceptance is key. And this is the work I do with parents. And it's this unconditional acceptance of the feeling your child is sharing. And so I've been in spaces, a child will come into the therapeutic space, the parent will be there, and the child will say, you love my sister more than you love me. And the work I've done with parents, so I meet separately with parents before we meet together as together, I'll tell a parent, so in this case, you love my sister more than me. There's different ways to respond. One is the parent can get defensive. How dare you say that? Don't you know all I do for you? Don't you know all the love for you? That does not work. Second, a parent can reassure. And this gets sometimes we don't realize, but reassurance is actually not that helpful. Reassurance, I love you. I love you. No, I love you so much. I love you so much. The third thing a parent could do is solution, right? Well, maybe we can spend more time together and we'll do this, we'll do that. And the work with parents and the work for all of us, stay with the feeling your child is sharing. You don't have to agree with the
Mhm.
statement, you love my sister more than me, to unconditionally accept the feeling. And it can go along the lines, and this is the work I do with parents, and then parents in the therapeutic space with a child can, with curiosity and with empathy, can say, wow, if, and this is the key, if, because when you say if, does not mean you agree with the state. If you believe that I love your sister more than you, oh my goodness, no wonder you're so upset with me. No wonder you're so angry. That opens up a space for us to explore together with the child, because many times the child does not even know where the feelings coming from. For us to together with no judgment, curiously engage and explore, what does that mean? Where's this coming from? And so that's the work for me around DDP that I've learned so much and that I apply in my day-to-day therapeutic practice.
Something that I'm thinking about is that we all get this, we all find this so hard as I think particularly as parents or caregivers, it's something about our kiddos that triggers something in us that causes us to just get defensive right away. And when somebody says instead, let's try acceptance, then we go to, oh, but if I accept it, then it means I'm agreeing with it.
Yeah.
We're in this like, when did we become, when did this mindset develop, that, a lot of us are smart individuals, yet we get so stuck on, if I accept it, it means I'm agreeing with it.
Right. No, it's so true. And I think it's connected to our own childhoods, how we were parented, but it's also messaging in society, right? The parent, you just need to correct your children.
Hmm.
Your children you need to prepare and it comes from a space of, that's what you've done to survive. That's what you've done to survive. And this feeling like, my child needs to learn, right? They
Hmm.
need to learn right from wrong, right? It's sort of like this very adversarial space can become. And then we see this in our society in the context, right? It's pitting one against the other and might is right. And many times with parents, and that's the work as a parent, right? And it also comes from a space that I need to be strong for my child. I can't be vulnerable with my child. My child needs to see me as strong because it's a hard world out there and I need to prepare them for the world. And many times it's just that space of acceptance, accepting that feeling because I have families that come in with children with significant behavioral concerns, and the work is starting with the feeling and what's underlying this. The behavior then solves itself
Hmm. Hmm.
and that's a lot of, my experience and my work is we start with like, just accept it because that feeling is real. There is no right or wrong. That feeling is real. And you can separate the two. Because then many times, and I have seen this, children will say things to trigger because they know the trigger points for their parents. And for many times, parents, it's not the trigger itself about the present, but it brings back parents to their own childhood and they're triggered. The child unconsciously, the body of the child knows, I need to move away from this very scary feeling. I'm going to trigger my parent and say something so outlandish, they're going to be stuck on the statement and they're going to send me to my room for a timeout because this is too scary, the feeling. And this is not consciously that's happening in children. That's the body that's
Hmm.
protecting itself. And many times, what would happen if we just let's pause that statement? Oh, you're the worst dad in the world. And just stay with the feeling. Wow, if you feel I'm the worst dad in the world, no wonder you're upset with me. No wonder you're so angry. And that's how we open up and that's how we grow together.
Hmm. I love that clarification, Stephen, that you've made, because I do think that many adults do get stuck on it, and even you mentioned a little bit about just society in itself that has, we seem to be in this place right now, which we're not going to dive into this because
Right,
I could talk about this a lot, but we're in
right.
this place of extremes that we either have to be the authoritarian or we have to be the lay down and,
Yes,
walk all over me parent, instead of finding that middle ground where we can be accepting, and
right.
then we work on the behavior if the behavior is still occurring, which
Right.
usually means coming back to the feeling, right?
And,
So
and what I've learned, right, and whether it's working at the structural systemic level or working with a parent child, that can only happen when there's safety,
mm,
where there's a safe space, a safe place, a safe relationship where I can take risks, where I can make mistakes, where I can come in unformed in terms of my thoughts and my feelings. Because what is shame? Shame is stays within us, stays inside. And what is that experience when you bring shame outside? When you bring it out and you share it, and your parent is witnessing that with you and is not jumping away or shying away or defensing away or shouting away, but staying with you. That's where the healing happens. And that's the broader conversation. I know we're not going there, but we get lost in terms of that. We get lost in terms of like, let's start with how are we going to find a space where we can just acknowledge and accept the feelings? You may disagree with whatever is being stated, but can we start in that space? And for that to be able to happen, there needs to be safety at all different levels, and especially with children and parents, that is critical. If the child feels safe and their body feels safe, we don't realize sometimes we think children, children are, and this maybe we can talk a little bit polyvagal and SE, but children are always communicating with we all communicate with our bodies. From the moment
mhm,
we're born, it's our bodies that communicate before we can even speak. The language is so abundant, so expansive, and parents get to know what that cry means, what that body movement means. And we sort of get lost as we grow through the obfuscations of language and wording and gatekeeping. We all become experts sophistry experts at like moving away and distracting through language. And children don't generally have that. They're still very much communicating through their bodies. And that's a lot of the work. And that's why I very much focused on, first of all, around nervous systems, right? And this is where polyvagal theory, it helps you understand, that attachment is inseparable from our nervous systems. I often, I think of our nervous system as sort of our nervous system is sort of a map that our bodies started drawing early in childhood, right? From our very first connection, our very first relationship, our bodies were charting this map. Oh, where is it safe? Where is it
Hmm.
dangerous? Who will meet me? Who will not? And this map, this nervous system map, is our guide for how we move through the world, whether to open up or protect ourselves, shut down, or stay on high alert. And the thing is, Christy, from my experiences, we carry this map with us, even as adults, in our parenting, in our relationships, in our work. Our nervous system is still navigating those old directions. And sometimes the map is outdated. It's no longer what was needed then. And we need to honor that the map, the nervous system was responding because it had to respond. That was the only response. But what was needed then may not be needed now.
Hmm.
And the work is to notice that map, the map we've been carrying, and to gradually draw new experiences of safety and connection, new lines in that map. And a lot of that is the work that I do with parents is understanding what we start with ourselves and our own nervous system, right? Understanding when I'm with my child and if my child's nervous system is really activated, first of all, noticing that and noticing where am I? Where's my nervous system there? And am I reacting, if I get activated, am I reacting to my child who's in front of me? Or am I maybe reacting to my spouse and seeing my child and my spouse? Am I reacting to my own childhood? And that's the work because when we are connected to our nervous system, when we're engaged, we can help our children regulate their own nervous system. And when we are activated, and because nervous systems like to be in sync. So if my child's nervous system is so activated, that nervous system wants me to be activated. And if
Hmm.
I get there, and we all do because we're all imperfect. And it's okay for our children to experience our imperfections because it tells them that we're human and it tells them that we can all make mistakes. But if I notice in myself that I'm so activated and triggered by my child that my nervous system needs their activated nervous system, what I always tell parents, as long as your child's physically safe, step away.
Hmm.
A bit short, you can say, right now, I'm going to move away. I'm going to take space for myself. Move away. That will both help your child's nervous system come down and your own nervous system. And then when you meet again with a child, you're meeting them where they are. You recognize and how hard that was. They know they should not have broken the table, broken the window, whatever it was. That's for later. But right now we're focused in terms, okay, we're back. We're back in connection.
I think that that's for me, I think about many parents and caregivers who are doing it singly, for whatever reason that might be, and how much of a challenge it is for them to actually, be able to step away.
Yes,
Um,
yes,
and because I completely agree with you, I would recommend the exact same thing. If the child is physically safe, step away.
right,
And I think you're completely right that the first thing we have to do is recognize our own nervous system, and how we are dysregulated.
right. No, and I think you just mentioned something so important, right? Like we are, like when you're a single parent and you're handling, and it's not just one child, but you have three children in the home, and one is it's just having compassion with ourselves and with our bodies and recognizing we're doing the best we can. And so when that child is so activated and it's okay. It's okay. This too shall pass, right? And it's okay to share with our children. And this is the work, I believe it's about honesty within the more we're tuned in and connected to our own bodies, our nervous systems, the more it helps us then to be honest with our own children, right? Where we can be like, you know what? Just as a heads up, I've had a really hard day at work today. So I'm just going to be a little crabby, right? And I may not want to play with you. It's not about you. I'm just really tired. But I know, buddy, I know how disappointing that is. But mom, I'm gonna take some time. I need to rest a little bit. Children get that. They understand that. And we forget, like my experience is children lie for adults. They know what's going on. And even if they don't consciously know what's going on, their bodies know. And that's
Hmm.
why it's always important, communication, communication. And it's okay for your child to experience you dysregulated. And that's okay. It's about being able after that moment to say, you know what? I just had a, I should maybe not, I should not have screamed at you, but I was so tired. And it doesn't mean I'm not saying it's okay to what you did, but I also see like I was just really tired then. And that's what children need to experience and to hear. And that's what strengthens their relationship with their parents. And that's what strengthens a child in the world out there. Because they get to understand, is it me or is it that person? What's being communicated? What's that body communicating with my body? And this is again where, the third strand of my work is somatic experiencing, right? It's all in our bodies. It's not that our emotions are too much or there's too much. It's that our body has to have the space and support to fully process our whole selves, all of our emotions. And it really is, I think like my experience with somatic experiencing in the body, and this is the work I also do with children and parents, is many times what happens is that energy was stuck. And how do we allow that energy to come out? Within a safe space in a way that it could not come out at the moment because your body had to do what it had to do to survive, and your body has brought you to where you are today. And it's honoring and giving gratefulness to your body that's brought us to where we are today, and allowing a space for that energy when it's ready to come out and to support that space. And I've had, like, so the way if you come into my therapeutic space, my space, there's trampolines, there's pillows, there's snowballs, all this, we can do artwork. And so I've had children come in, right? And they just come in and parent with a child, and the child's so angry and so upset and so much energy. And moving around and running around and wants to hit the pillow and wants to hit the paper. And part of like, we're not, whoa, my God, it's not about suppressing. Oh, like, dude, it's like, and this is the work with a parent, through trust, and this is the relationship, right? This is the work. If the parent trusts me, then the child will trust me. And then the three of us can be in relationship in a way that I can support the parent and child. And with a parent, it's like the child comes in with so much energy and aggression, and maybe something happened in school, and I don't want to talk about it. And it's a, whoa, my goodness, there's so much energy right now. Your body really wants to move. Oh, it wants to hit something. What about hitting the pillow? What about trampoline? You want to jump in the trampoline and hit that balloon as hard as you can? And it's allowing the energy to release itself and to come back within rhythm. And this is the way that the disorganized energy that a child comes in, helping organize that energy, helping release that energy, coming back into a rhythm. So after 10 minutes of doing this, the child's now bouncing rhythmically. We're passing the balloon. And then we can start talking like, oh my goodness. Wow, I wonder what happened today. Because you came in, oh, wow. And the parents, usually what I ask the parents is to give me a heads up. What's been a good thing this last week, something that's been hard, and which is something I learned from the amazing Daphne Lender. And it's about like, oh my goodness, oh, I heard, yeah, this happened in school, and it opens up the space. But we first need to settle our bodies to be able to open that space up.
Um, I just love that description. That I mean, a lot of that is what we do at our organization too at Chaddock, and it's it's I'm going to say this, and this is probably not going to be fair to all of us who are in this field because I know how hard it is, but it seems so simple. Like because if we understood our bodies, it's of course, it makes sense that we need to get all that energy out. Of course, it makes sense before we jump into having a deep conversation. Um, and I say that in with the caveat of I having done this work, I know that it is not simple by any means, and it's very hard, and very intentional. I think my hope as a professional is how do we help our parents understand that it doesn't have to be a war between us and our kids, and
Yeah.
that yes, if we pay attention to their bodies first rather than trying to solve the problem, sometimes we can move through that process a lot quicker.
Right. And I think, and I think it's with compassion and understanding. And I think, we start with ourselves. I think as
Mhm.
society, right, we're told, like all the different ways, and we're talking as we adult into life, we give up the essence of who we are in many ways, of trusting the instincts of ourselves and our bodies. And society, right, what happens when a child's in the middle of a park or in the subway and starts screaming and all the ways that we may feel judged, right? And that we are judged. I've worked in the child welfare system, and it's heartbreaking when there's a child who's so dysregulated and screaming, and the parent is being observed in the out, and it's, how can you support that child? How can that you support that parent when they feel every little move they're making is being micromanaged and micro observed? And I think as parents, we start with a space of, we're doing the best we can, and that's been always my experience, Christy. I've worked in, all over the world in different contexts, pre-war, war, post-war, child welfare, all this. And 99% of the parents I've ever experienced and met with, they love their children. They want what's best for their children. And it starts with a space where we allow, and there's a space for parents to listen to their bodies, to trust their
Mhm.
instincts as parents, and not what they experience or feel, and they're told many times how they have to respond, how they have to act. And so it starts with ourselves. It starts with creating a space in the therapeutic space where you come as you are. You come as you are, and that's okay. And with compassion and openness. But yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard because it's all about, like, and you see this in certain school structures, school systems, where it's all about the discipline. It's all about like crossing the dots or
Mhm.
the I's or whatever that expression is. But we get lost there. And we get lost there because we each, society, so much of society is about disconnecting our bodies from ourselves. And
Mhm.
there's a broader conversation there in terms of consumerism and all of the ways that the more disconnected we and disorganized we are within ourselves, the more certain structures and systems within society and benefit. But that's a broader, bigger conversation, maybe for another time.
Yeah, definitely for another time, of course. Something I wanted to just highlight from what you've been talking about, Stephen, that really sticks in my mind. And I talk to when I train people and about this work, I always, in an effort to bring the body piece in, one of the examples I give is, if you were privileged enough to have a healthy, safe early life experience, what does it feel like when you go home, wherever home is? And it's not even a feeling that you could put a word to. It's a relief. It's like this, like your body literally like has a sigh of relief feeling.
Yeah.
And I find that that is often just so helpful for people to, really remember a reminder that it's kept within our body, that our children don't always have words to put to those experiences. It's that feeling in the body.
Right. And that's where to me hope also lies, right? Because even no matter in whatever moment you're in, we can always, in noticing our bodies, we can also find parts of our bodies that may not feel perfect or great or calming, but they feel less worse. And so how to stay connected to that part of our bodies that's feeling less worse, and grounding ourselves and breathing and just reconnecting with our bodies. And so, a lot of the work when I work with organizations, so when in the child welfare context, when I work with staff that work with young people, is starting with ourselves. And there's certain somatic experiencing exercises that invite the workers to do, that it's a way of immediately finding a way to settle your body down, and how you can do that in the midst of it all, and how that can be communicated. But yeah, I mean, I think that's really, really important.
So we have a little bit of time left, and I wanted to shift our conversation
Yeah.
into just some of your other work a little bit, kind of a personal interest, but I'm sure some
Yeah.
of our listeners will also be interested. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was your the collide of careers that you have in terms of the law side of things and the social work side of things. And so tell us just a little bit about that and kind of maybe how you've seen attachment show up in those two worlds.
Sure, sure. And so by training, I have a law degree. I also have a social work degree. And I was very intentional when I chose both of those degrees because I've always experienced and seen the connection between them. And so when I think about, law, what law did, it gave me a sense of the lenses of structures and power, right? How does power work and how do international human rights systems work, policy systems? And the structure of power and understanding power. And social work has given me the intimacy of relationship, right? Accompanying children and families, noticing what lives in the body, meeting each family, each person where they are, the here and now of connection. And it's those two connections, the connections of law, of structures, of system, the connections of social work, and the bridge in many ways for both has been attachment. Because the same principles, Christy, that help a child feel safe with a parent, attunement, co-regulation, trust, also shape how communities experience institutions. If systems stay in the survival mode, they can't connect and communities pay the cost. And so the work is creating conditions where safety and connection become possible again. And so there's a structural way, so much of my work when I work with organizations, whether it's at the government level, at the city level, at the international organization level, is how do we create those spaces of intersubjectivity, those
Mm.
spaces of being seen, of acceptance, of influencing. And so that's something that connects very much in my work, both at the structural policy level and at the social work individual level with families and children. And I feel that working in one area strengthens my work in the other area and vice versa.
And do you, throughout your experiences throughout the world, have you seen and experienced differences? Different parts of the world better at this intersubjectivity within systems than others?
It varies, but like as I've come and as I grow on in my own professional and personal journey, it's when I think about policies and programs nowadays or interventions, in a sense, I think of them as living organisms, sort of attachment figures at scale. And it's meaning, those spaces where I have found where there's a space where where communities are met, where there's a space for co-regulation, for trust building, where it's okay. And like, this goes back again and again, where connection feels safe enough to risk again. And this is where I've seen that it works. And to create those conditions, again, where safety, connection, consistency become possible. But it really requires that there needs to be humility in power, right? And ultimately, and this is what I learned in law, and I experienced it quite it's just, it's interesting. I'll share an anecdote. My first class in law school, I took a class and I forget what it was about, but like I remember in law school, you learn case studies. And I got a joint law and social work degree. So at the same time, I was pursuing my social work degree and then I was in law school, in different worlds. And I remember being in that class and we were doing a case study and it was one around property and it was one and case studies based on real cases, on real individuals, real lives. And I remember being in this space and we were learning a case study and it was about property case study. It was very specific, a 1907 case about this child that was on some land that had a sort of a board that was connected to the land, that was connected to water, and the child jumped from the board that was connected to the land and drowned. And the whole story was who's responsible for this? Is the landowner responsible? Is the person who put the board? Is it the child? Is it the family? And what struck me, Christy, is how impersonal it was, how dehumanizing, how othering. And in that space, that law requires in some ways to remove ourselves. And I just found that really striking that we talked about it as like if it's just a logic discussion,
Mhm.
when it's about real human beings. And we lose that, and we lose that so much in so many structures and so many systems. And it's about creating spaces where people can be encountered and communities can be encountered as they are. And so that's something that has really stayed with me in my work, And I've experienced both the good and the not so good, and the not so great and the really bad when it comes to structures and powers. And a lot of it is about where accountability lies. Where does that shared accountability lies? Just like when a parent and child, the accountability lies with the parent and child, child and parent. It's
Hmm.
okay for your child to hold you accountable. And because that's how you grow together, where your child can tell you, Dad, a parent will say, "Oh, if you want, I'll play with you. But I see you're playing with your friend." No, Dad, you're tired. You don't want to play with me because you're tired. And for the parent in that moment to be like, you know what? And take accountability. You know what? You're right. Yeah, I know I said that you could, but you're right. You're right. Because it's telling the child you're right. What you're experiencing is true. I am tired. I've had a long day at work. And I'm sorry that, I realize, you lied to me. I, you know, and it's about that shared accountability where you can be in a structure in a refugee context that I've worked in, and where power, and you see this in contexts where there's lack of accountability, when there's no, the accountability is skewed in the ways that we're accountable to the donor, we're accountable to other systems above us, and it's always managing upwards instead of really starting where accountability should be at the community level, that family level.
Hmm.
And so that's something that's really, really struck me in my work, and part of my ongoing journey in all the ways that I engage, whether it's with a family, whether it's with a UNICEF, an international organization, whether it's with a government, or whether it's a city agency.
What I feel like I'm hearing is that we can at least begin with us as individuals and as individual families, because the we're in a point in our climate right now where there is a lot of unsafety. There's a lot of systems in survival mode. There's a, a lack of accountability in many different areas, creating that unsafety and unrest. And so, that doesn't feel good.
Right.
But I think the hope lies in us starting with ourselves.
Right.
We can't control all of this, but we can control what we do within our own family units and
Right.
communities.
Right. And that's so important, Christy. And I think it's also noticing, right? Because I do find that systems of power thrive on dysregulated bodies, on
Mm,
dysregulated nervous systems. And what we don't realize, and within the context we are with so much that the ground has been shifted, the ground has ceased to be below us in many ways. What we these systems thrive on dysregulated bodies, on disorganized bodies, on disorganized structures, nervous systems. And so it's just noticing that and the impact that it has with us. And noticing, many times I experience within the work I do with communities and structures, and I've experienced this in the international humanitarian context, is, when we think about nervous system responses, there's the fight, the flight, there's the freeze. And what I'm experiencing right now in our current context, what I have experienced in context of war, pre-war, post-war, is freeze. And freeze is something that we don't realize. It's so consuming of our energy, where we shut down and we don't realize that freeze is, you have your foot on the accelerator and your foot in your brake, and it's consuming so much, and it's shutting us down. It's self-censoring ourselves, and we don't realize that that's sort of in the mode we're in. And so how to thaw out of it, and thaw out of it is through connection, through relationship. As you said, the person who's with me, my family, my community, my neighborhood, to know that I am not alone, and to know that it's okay, and to recognize it. Because many times when I work in therapy with clients who experience so much freeze, like, but I'm in bed the whole day and I'm just so tired. My goodness, of course, your body is using so much energy right now. And I use the metaphor of the foot's on the accelerator, the foot's on the brake at the same time. That is so exhausting. No wonder you're so tired. And so noticing that and understanding that also opens up for parents, for families, for individuals, for communities to be able to heal.
Well, Stephen, Thank you so much. And I'm glad to finish on that note of hope and healing. Your insight, your experience is just wonderfully profound. And we will be sharing links in our show notes so that folks can find out more about your work and what you're doing. But I just wanted to thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Christy. Really appreciate it.